you with us. Liberal cabinet ministers, as you heard there, are standing by embattled Finance Minister Bill Morneau, while Conservatives continue to call for him to resign. And they're now demanding a second ethics investigation into the Finance Minister after he revealed that he failed to pay back We Charity more than $41,000 worth of expenses related to 2 trips he and his family took with the organization. Morneau disclosed and apologized for this while appearing before the Finance Committee just yesterday. But it's the latest link between the Trudeau government and the charity that it chose to deliver a nearly $1 billion student summer grant program. Let's get reaction from MPs. Adam Van Coverton, he's the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Youth. Michael Cooper is the Conservatives' deputy finance critic. And Charlie Angus is the NDP's ethics critic. Hello to all 3 of you. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making time for our program tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Van Coverton, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. And on those calls for the finance minister to resign, do you stand by the finance minister, or do you think he should resign?
Absolutely, I stand beside and alongside my colleagues who, have total faith in Minister Bill Morneau. I accept his contrition. He was apologetic and clearly embarrassed by the statement yesterday. So yes, I have 100% faith in him.
Are you sympathetic, though, Mr. Van Coverton, to Canadians who question how, at a time when millions of them are worried about even having a paycheck, the minister could simply forget that he essentially is indebted to this charity for $41,000 at a time when he also signed off on a decision to award them up to $43 million for a contract?
I'm as frustrated and annoyed as your average Canadian. I fielded calls and responded to emails today about it. And I understand, why people are a little bit frustrated. But I also saw that same frustration on the minister's face yesterday when he proactively cut a check and disclosed that he had made an error. And, it's incumbent upon all of us to realize and recognize that we all make mistakes, and he proactively made amends. So I'm glad that he did. And yes, absolutely, I stand by him.
Mr. Cooper, I know that your party has requested a second investigation based on the revelations yesterday through the Ethics Commissioner. Have you received a response to that request?
We have not received a response, but for the minister to say sorry is simply not good enough. We have a minister of finance who, by his own admission, has contravened at least 5 sections of the Conflict of Interest Act. We knew before yesterday's hearing that the minister had contravened sections 6 and 11 of the Act by failing to recuse himself from the decision to award this nearly $1 billion contribution to the We organization, an organization that employed one of his daughters and promoted another one of his daughters, including with respect to her book. But then we found out that he accepted $41,000 in illegal travel expenses. That is a clear breach of the Conflict of Interest Act. And for the finance minister to have not known, as he claims, is just not believable. Where did he think?
So you just don't believe, I just want to be clear, Mr. You don't believe there's any possibility that it was an oversight?
How does the minister explain $41,000 in travel, in food, in accommodation? Where did he think the money was coming from? And it's quite a coincidence that he only seemed to discover this at the day that he appeared before the Finance Committee when he cut a check. It's unacceptable. The minister has breached the Act. He's breached the trust of the office that he holds. And the only thing that is left for him to do is to do the honorable thing and resign, which Her Majesty's loyal opposition has called upon him to do.
Mr. Angus, is it impossible to believe that it was a mistake? I know I totally understand the point about $41,000. I certainly couldn't, not remember $41,000. But the minister was pretty explicit and repeated many times, the process by which he discovered it and the fact that he cut the check right after. Is it possible that it was an oversight?
Well, with Bill Morneau, it's certainly possible. I mean, this is a guy who forgot he had a villa in France. This is something that any other Canadian would never be able to be in a position to forget. But I think what really makes this damning was I asked him at Finance Committee a simple question. I asked him if he'd ever read the Conflict of Interest Act. And he seemed completely surprised by the question. He said, well, when I was elected, I was given all those acts. These aren't just documents you put away in your desk. These are the ruling guides that we are expected to follow. This is the law by which members of parliament work. So we have a finance minister in a government that is already, we have multiple investigations into the prime minister where he's been found guilty. With Bill Morneau now, we're looking at sections 4, 5, 6, 7, 11, possibly 12, possibly 14, section 21 of the act. We're going to have to write a whole new ethics code just for Bill. And what's disturbing here is he doesn't seem to think it's a problem. He thinks, well, geez, I'm really sorry, but, we paid for me to travel. We hired my daughter. I was dealing with while this $900 million deal went down. All of this is contrary to the law. And all of this is contrary to Canadians who, in a time of a pandemic and crisis, expect the government to put the people of the country and their needs first and not be making calls to their friends and not being the pack mule for the Kielburger Group. This is why I think Minister Morneau has badly, badly damaged his reputation with Canadians and badly damaged trust when we need to be able to trust government during this pandemic.
Are you calling on him to resign? Last night we had Mr. Julian, your colleague, on, and he was not yet ready to make that decision. He wanted more information.
What we want to do for the New Democrats is we need to get answers into how this $900 million boondoggle got through. Who were the key players? How is this going to be funneled through what we now learn is some kind of liability holding company? Bill Morneau, I think, has seriously damaged his reputation. We're going to wait to see what the ethics commissioner says. We want to get all the information. But I think Mr. Bill Morneau and the Liberals need to understand that they have a seriously, seriously damaged minister at a time when we need confidence.
Mr. Van Koeverden, I'll get you in 1 second, Mr. Cooper, I promise. I just want to get Mr. Van Koeverden in to respond to what both of you are saying. And I think what kind of cuts to the heart of it is certainly what my inbox is full of. And I take the point that the ministers are putting forth that they've put a lot of programs forward, the government has so far, that have worked and benefited Canadians. This program in particular, that was the description for it as well, right? Helping out students. But at the end of the day, whether the intent was malicious or not, the connections are hard to dismiss, right? Like there's $41,000, there's $300,000 in speaking fees, and there was a contract that was ultimately, or an agreement, a contribution agreement that was ultimately awarded to an organization that so clearly has ties to people with decision-making authority. Like, do you understand how Canadians can have some doubt, Mr. Van Koeverden, about your government's ability to have their best interest at heart, not its own?
I understand the frustration. I totally do, but I don't think that Canadians share the resolve that my two colleagues have expressed with respect to any non-confidence in our government. We've helped millions and millions of Canadians over the past 4 months with it. We're in an emergency situation, and an emergency situation calls for swift action. And I can speak, very honestly, when I was expressing urgency with respect to helping Canadians as quickly as possible. And my biggest regret from all of this is that fewer young Canadians will benefit from this great service opportunity that we were trying to build in very, very short order. Canadians deserve this. Yeah. Canadians deserve the opportunity, particularly young Canadians deserve the opportunity to serve their communities. And that was the intention. And I think if you look at the intention of all of the aspects, I think some of the aspects of this situation have been conflated, frankly. But I think if you look at all of them, you look at the intention behind why Minister Morneau was on this trip. Well, because he cares about people and he wanted to help a good charity do good work around the world. Why are we building a CSSG program? Because we care about Canadians and we want to see young people active and purposefully engaged across the country in rebuilding the community that they live in and love. Why are Canadians engaged with the charitable sector, the nonprofit sector, and in community organizations that are serving their towns and cities? Because Canadians care. And our government does too. And that's exactly why we are engaged in trying to our very best during this emergency situation to serve their needs.
But ultimately,
and to create opportunities and programs for youth to be able to serve their communities. And that's the intention. And as I said,
yeah, can you shelve ethics because of intention, Mr. Van Koeverden? Like, can you put aside ethics because your heart is in the right place?
Absolutely not. And I don't think that anybody intentionally shelved their ethics. I think that, financially, clearly, Mr. Morneau is in a different situation than your average Canadian. I think that's well known. I don't think we should rake him over the coals for the fact that, he made an error, and he expressed that. He expressed contrition and regret for that. And every Canadian is disappointed in that oversight, but the reality is it was a mistake. And, it's not about him pocketing money or anything that's being alleged. That's ridiculous. He took part in a humanitarian endeavor. And I think it's really, really important that we recognize that a humanitarian effort and that intention was a good one.
Okay, Mr. Cooper, I'll get you to respond to that. And then Mr. Angus, I'll get you to as well.
Well, first of all, the We organization issued a statement contradicting the minister. They said that his travel was complimentary. At the end of the day, there was never going to be an invoice. Morneau didn't expect an invoice. He showed total disregard for the Conflict of Interest Act, and he only came forward when he effectively got caught. And with respect to this organization, the We organization, and how in the world they ended up with this nearly $1 billion contribution to their organization defies any explanation. This is an organization that was totally ill-equipped to administer the program, but just out of coincidence, happened to give $300,000 to the Prime Minister's family, provided political and social benefit to the Prime Minister. The same in the case of the finance minister's family.
Once again, I think you're conflating different.
Just let him finish, and don't worry, we'll get everyone
in. And of course, showered his family on illegal vacations. It's time for answers, and that's why we will use every tool in the parliamentary toolbox to get answers, including having the Prime Minister appear before the Finance Committee to tell Canadians exactly what his role was, and to do so under oath, to require him to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Just one quick point of clarification before I turn it over to Mr. Angus. The contract itself, the agreement, the contribution agreement was worth $912 million. We would have been paid up to $43.5 million.
$43.5 million.
Yep, that's what I said.
How convenient for an organization that was in financial trouble. They stood to benefit.
Mr. Angus, last word to you.
Well, we don't know exactly how much we would have been paid because we haven't seen it. We don't know anything about the onboarding costs, all the training fees. I've talked to many people who work at We and formerly worked at We who are very concerned about this. But I think my Liberal colleague captures it perfectly. I don't think the Liberals have ever read the Conflict of Interest Act. Because it's not that Mr. Morneau was trying to pocket money. It was that under the Conflict of Interest Act, these gifts would have been reasonably seen to try to buy influence with him. And I think it succeeded very well because he played a key role in pushing the We plan that wasn't thought out. If the program should have been there to help Canadians. They had 2 months to set it up. No students have been hired. The Liberals have done nothing with this. They have not turned this around. They're crying in the pity pot that people are being mean to them because Bill Morneau's a nice guy. He got caught. He was coming to a committee to explain himself, and then he suddenly discoveed.
But Mr. Van Couverden's point, I'll get you to respond specifically, is that the intent was not malicious, right? It's like you said, it's not like Minister Morneau was looking to benefit personally.
Well, that's exactly the issue. But this is, I'm sorry, can I just finish?
Yes, of course.
Because the Liberals are misrepresenting this, that somehow we're trying to make Mr. Morneau to be malicious. Mr. Morneau was negligent because it was about the buying of influence of him and the Prime Minister so that when this project was put on the table, the question was, why were they given an advanced deal that no one else got? It's because they thought these were the great guys. I mean, they flew Mr. Morneau and his family around the world. They were nice people. That's called influence buying. That's why the Conflict of Interest Act.
Where the recommendation was
but
from.
The Liberals,
sorry, you're misleading Canadians with that statement.
Mr. Van Couveren, let him finish, and I'll get you in. Okay.
I would ask my honourable colleague to read the Aga Khan decision that found the Prime Minister guilty. If any of them had bothered to read that, they wouldn't be in the trouble they're in today, but they don't think the law applies to them. Okay. That's why they're in trouble.
I'm running out of time, so Mr. Van Couverden, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and I agree on some statements that I think that Canadians are frustrated, but I would have to come back to the fact that the intention was to serve young people and ensure that they have an opportunity. And I've heard twice now that he was caught, and that's just not accurate. Being called to the Finance Committee, he had a look at his finances and found that there was an error and apologized.
But what if he weren't called?
Apologized proactively and paid back before. That's not called being caught.
Well, he was already under one investigation. When you're under investigation, you're caught. So he would have known
That's
that the
not accurate.
ethics
That's just not true.
commissioner would have looked into
I'm on-
more. This would have come
I'm
out.
unfortunately out of time. I feel like we could talk for a long time about this, but I very much appreciate the three of you carving out some of your evening for this. Thanks to Adam Van Couverton, Michael Cooper, and Charlie Angus.
Thank you so much.
I've got to take a commercial.